So I want to start today by having you picture a very specific scene, mid-20th century. There's this highly eccentric, completely anonymous inventor walking into his downtown laboratory.
Right, the famous shoebox incident.
Exactly. So he's carrying this little mechanical contraption. It's no bigger than like a standard shoebox. It's a pneumatic oscillator. And he just walks up and clamps this tiny device to the central steel support pillar of his building.
He dials it in and just turns it on.
Right. And for the first few minutes, literally nothing happens. It's just this quiet, rhythmic tapping. Tap, tap, tap. But then, about 10 minutes in, the entire foundation of the building actually begins to heave.
Yeah, plaster starts raining down from the ceilings.
Heavy cast iron machinery is physically walking across the laboratory floor from the vibrations. And, like, the police and fire departments rush to the scene because they think there's a localized earthquake happening.
And what do they find?
They find this genius inventor literally taking a sledgehammer to his own shoebox-sized machine just to stop the building from completely collapsing into the street.
It's just a wild historical footnote, but the physics behind it.
It's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Because the exact same invisible physics that nearly brought down thousands of tons of steel and concrete with a tiny box. That is the exact same underlying mechanism that is currently either quietly destroying your focus or, if you use it right, it holds the absolute secret to completely rewiring your human potential.
Yeah, I mean, the transition from a rattling building to, like, the architecture of the human mind, it might seem like this incredible leap, but the underlying mathematical reality governing both of those things is identical.
Completely identical, which brings us directly to you, the listener.
Yeah.
Because I want you to put yourself into a highly relatable, almost painfully familiar scenario.
We've all been there.
Right. You wake up, the alarm is blaring that same jarring tone. You drag yourself out of bed, you commute to the exact same job, you sit at the exact same desk.
And then on your lunch break, you're just scrolling the exact same algorithmic social media feeds.
Yeah, exactly. And you go to sleep feeling this bizarre, contradictory mix of total bone-deep exhaustion paired with absolute stagnation.
It's like you're sprinting on a treadmill.
Yes. You are sweating, your heart rate is up, you are putting in maximum effort, but you look at the scenery around you and it isn't changing.
It's really the defining paradox of our modern era. I mean,
Right.
we have access to more tools, more speed, more data than any generation in human history, yet an overwhelming percentage of the population feels completely paralyzed.
The sensation of high-velocity immobility.
Exactly.
And the frustration isn't just internal, right? Because while you are sweating on this treadmill, you inevitably look to your left and your right. You see others, maybe people you graduated with, people who started at the exact same entry-level position as you.
People holding the exact same cards you were dealt.
Yeah, and they are rapidly accelerating. They're seizing incredible opportunities, actively transforming their lives, building things of actual substance, and you are just like watching them blur past you.
And that observation, it almost always triggers a very specific, deeply painful internal monologue, a crisis of confidence that just attacks the ego.
You start running through all the excuses. You ask yourself, am I simply lacking some innate biological talent? Were they just born with better hardware?
Did they get a vastly superior roll of the genetic dice?
Right. So to compensate for this perceived gap, you try to force the issue. You try to catch up through sheer brute force volume. You start multitasking furiously.
Consuming endless streams of content.
Yeah, like listening to audiobooks at double speed while answering emails and cooking dinner. But by the end of the day, your cognitive energy is completely shattered. And when you measure your actual progress, you haven't moved forward a single inch.
Because the effort is there, but the underlying strategy is completely decoupled from how human neurology and the physical universe actually operate. I mean, brute force applied in the wrong direction is just kinetic waste.
It's exhausting just thinking about it. So the mission of our audio exploration today is to completely dismantle that feeling of being stuck on the treadmill.
We have a really fascinating stack of source documents today.
We really do. One set of these documents outlines the brutal, highly practical mechanics of personal development, right? The neurobiology of human habits, how the brain actually learns. It's exceptionally grounded.
Very terrestrial, very practical.
But the other set of documents, this is where the narrative becomes wildly intriguing. We have a set of historical notes, translated from the purple-inked journal of that same legendary visionary inventor from our opening story.
A genius who really operated in the shadows.
Yeah, and he discovered that the physical world operates on hidden laws of energy, vibration, and frequency.
And, at first glance, someone might assume we're analyzing two entirely incompatible domains here.
It definitely sounds like it.
Right. Because on one hand, you have the gritty reality of waking up early, forcing discipline, managing a daily calendar. And on the other hand, you have the invisible, almost ethereal physics of cosmic frequencies, electromagnetic wave fields, the sacred geometry of the universe.
They sound worlds apart.
But the profound revelation hidden in the synthesis of these texts is that these two realms are not separate. They are identical.
Wow.
The daily habits are literally simply the mechanical levers we pull to adjust our cosmic frequency. Together, they form this overarching blueprint for operating the human machine.
Let's start with the practical, grounded side of the equation first. The first massive trap identified in the text is the illusion of the autopilot life, specifically how we view learning.
The destination trap.
Yes, there's this pervasive mindset that education is a chronological destination. You sit in a classroom for a set number of years, you get a piece of paper, you toss a cap into the air, and you declare, I have arrived. I am a finished product. I know enough.
And the documents are just merciless in tearing this down. They state that the precise microsecond you declare your education complete, you begin to actively decay.
Decay, that's a strong word.
But it's accurate. The concept at play here is the half-life of knowledge. It's a metric that tracks how long it takes for half of the information in a given field to be proven obsolete or incorrect.
Okay, so give me an example of that.
Well, historically, if you learned a complex trade, let's say blacksmithing, or foundational maritime navigation, that specific body of knowledge would reliably sustain your career and your economic value for like 40 or 50 years.
So the half-life was basically an entire human lifespan.
Exactly. But today, we exist in an entirely different paradigm. The half-life of a learned skill, particularly in the tech, engineering, or digital sectors, is estimated at roughly 5 years.
5 years.
And in highly specialized fields, it's shrinking closer to 18 months. The modern socioeconomic system actively, aggressively punishes stagnation. It acts like a centrifuge, just spinning out those who rely on static knowledge, while disproportionately rewarding continuous adaptive learners.
So the people we see zooming past us on the metaphorical treadmill, they aren't operating with a larger innate hard drive. They just never uninstalled their learning software. They're constantly running updates.
That's a great way to put it. And the psychological framework governing this difference is the dichotomy between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset.
I've heard those terms thrown around a lot. What do the texts actually say about them?
An individual operating under a fixed mindset perceives intelligence, talent, and capability as static, unalterable traits. Like you're either dealt a winning hand at birth or you aren't.
Right.
And the devastating consequence of this framework is how it processes failure.
Yeah.
If your ego is tied to being naturally gifted, every single failure is interpreted as permanent biological proof of your inadequacy.
So if they attempt a new skill and stumble, the internal narrative immediately defaults to, I am biologically unsuited for this. I must stop before I embarrass myself.
Exactly. Whereas the growth mindset completely neutralizes failure. It reframes it from an indictment of your soul into a mere mechanical diagnostic tool.
It treats failure as raw data.
Right, because the growth mindset is rooted in the biological reality of neuroplasticity. The brain is not a solid block of clay baked in a kiln. It's a highly malleable, dynamic network.
So every single time you struggle with a new concept, when you feel that intense cognitive friction, you are not failing.
No, you are physically generating new synapses and thickening neural pathways. Failure is literally the somatic sensation of the brain rewiring its architecture to accommodate future success.
I want to visualize this for a second because the standard analogy here is usually financial, right? The compound interest of learning. Reading 10 pages a day yields massive dividends.
Yes.
But let's apply a more mechanical metaphor that explains the actual how. Imagine your brain as a massive, incredibly dense jungle.
I like this.
When you try to learn something new or build a new habit, you're standing at the edge of this jungle with a really dull machete. The first time you try to walk from point A to point B, it is agonizing.
They're hacking through thick vines, you're exhausted.
You barely make any progress. That is the feeling of cognitive friction. That is the feeling of failure.
It's a highly accurate biological representation. The initial electrical signal in the brain struggles to find a path.
But if you force yourself to walk that exact same path the next day and the day after that, the vines stay cleared, the dirt gets tamped down. Soon, you can walk it without the machete.
And here's where the brain's compound interest really kicks in.
Right, because if you keep using that path, the brain essentially says, Okay, we are using this route a lot. We need to upgrade the infrastructure. So it paves the dirt path with asphalt.
And in the brain, this asphalt is called myelin. It's an insulating sheath that wraps around the nerve fiber. Once that path is myelinated, the electrical signal doesn't just travel easily, it travels up to 100 times faster.
100 times. So reading those 10 pages a day or studying for 10 minutes isn't just accumulating trivia. You are slowly laying down a high-speed neural highway system.
Exactly. Over a year, the person who stayed still is still staring at an impenetrable jungle while you have a 12-lane autobahn.
But, and this begs the absolute most crucial question, how do you maintain that curiosity, that willingness to hack through the jungle when you are fundamentally exhausted?
That's the million-dollar question.
Think about children. When we were young, we interrogated reality constantly. We asked why about the physics of everything.
Why is the sky blue? Why does water freeze?
Why does the moon follow the car? We were relentless, insatiable learning machines. Then adulthood arrives, carrying the weight of mortgages, performance reviews, complex social obligations, and it just systematically beats that inherent curiosity out of us.
By age 30, we just stop asking why. We just want to get through the day.
So how do we retrieve that childhood operating system?
The source documents prescribe a highly specific cognitive remedy for this exhaustion. They posit that curiosity is not a passive default state in an adult. It's a fragile asset that must be aggressively protected.
Okay, so how do we protect it?
The primary shield you use is your internal semantic dialogue. The exact words you use to narrate your struggle dictate the biological response of your brain.
Give me an example.
When you confront a dense, difficult problem and you are cognitively depleted, the default adult response is a definitive, I can't do this.
Yeah, I say that all the time.
And that phrase acts as a hard stop. It signals the amygdala to initiate a threat response, effectively shutting down the problem-solving centers in the prefrontal cortex. But the text suggests deploying a single word modification. You append the word yet.
I can't do this yet.
Yep.
It sounds almost too simple to work.
Its simplicity masks its profound neurological impact. Appending the word yet instantly shifts the cognitive framing from a state of permanent defeat to a state of temporary mechanical challenge.
It reopens the door.
It tells the prefrontal cortex, the solution exists, we just haven't computed it. True education, as defined by these texts, is a lifelong, relentless exploration of both the external world and the internal self.
So by shifting your internal dialogue, you grant yourself the necessary psychological permission to be a novice again. You remove the ego, allowing you to act as a student of reality, regardless of your job title or your age.
Precisely.
Shifting that internal dialogue is actually the perfect bridge into the second major theme we need to unpack. Because telling yourself, I can't do this yet, implies that you are going to keep trying tomorrow.
Which brings us face to face with the grand illusion of human behavior.
The myth of motivation.
Oh, yes.
We are all intimately familiar with this vicious cycle. You watch a powerful documentary or read a life-changing article, and you experience this massive surge of inspiration. You declare to yourself, this is the turning point. Starting tomorrow, I am waking up at 4:30 a.m., I am running 6 miles, I am launching my side business, and I am cutting out all processed sugar.
It is a physiological and psychological recipe for catastrophic failure.
It's the ultimate setup for self-sabotage. You sustain this heroic effort for perhaps 3 days fueled by pure adrenaline. But by day 4, the initial excitement has evaporated. The alarm blares, it is cold and pouring rain outside, your muscles are screaming, and your internal reservoir of motivation is completely empty.
And then you hit snooze.
The new routine shatters, and the accompanying guilt pushes you further back than where you started. The documents reveal a harsh, unyielding truth. Success, in any domain, is almost never the result of massive, overnight, heroic leaps. It is the silent, unsexy, remarkably mundane accumulation of highly structured daily actions.
Motivation is a scam.
Discipline is a permanent system.
We really must dissect why motivation is so unreliable. Motivation is not a structural framework. It is a transient, emotional state.
It's just a feeling.
Biologically, it's primarily driven by a chemical spike of dopamine in the brain, a neurotransmitter heavily involved in anticipating a reward. The critical flaw with dopamine is its extreme sensitivity to external, uncontrollable variables.
Like what?
Did you get insufficient REM sleep? Did a colleague send a passive-aggressive email? Is the barometric pressure dropping outside? Every single one of these factors drastically alters your dopamine baseline.
Wow.
If you construct your strategy for personal transformation on the foundation of an emotion, your progress will inherently be as erratic and unstable as your daily mood swings.
I think the problem is that we confuse motivation with willpower. We think, okay, if I'm not motivated, I'll just use my willpower to force myself out of bed. But willpower is a trap too, isn't it?
A devastating trap, because a willpower is a finite, depletable resource. This phenomenon is scientifically documented as decision fatigue. Every single choice you make throughout the day, from what shirt to wear, to navigating traffic, to prioritizing emails, consumes a measurable amount of glucose in the brain. By the time evening arrives, the prefrontal cortex, which governs executive function and self-control, is effectively running on empty.
So if you rely on willpower to force yourself to read complex material or exercise at 6:00 p.m., you will almost certainly fail.
The prefrontal cortex will simply surrender to the easier, path of least resistance alternative, which is usually the couch and a screen. Therefore, the texts insist on abandoning willpower entirely in favor of architectural systems. You must remove the decision-making process from the equation.
You move the behavior out of the exhausting prefrontal cortex and hand it off to the automated systems in the brain.
Specifically, the basal ganglia. This is the region of the brain responsible for pattern recognition and automated habit execution. It operates with incredible energy efficiency.
Okay, so how do we do that? How do we transfer a behavior to the basal ganglia?
You must construct a rigid ritual by anchoring the new habit to an existing permanent behavior. If your goal is to read those daily 10 pages, you do not leave the timing vague, hoping you'll summon the willpower later. You build a conditional logic trigger.
If this, then that.
Exactly. You declare, immediately after I hear the click of the coffee maker finishing its morning brew, before I even look at a digital screen, I will sit in the designated green chair and read.
So the coffee maker becomes the neurological trigger.
After several weeks, the brain wires the sound of the coffee machine directly to the physical act of sitting in the chair. The basal ganglia assumes control. The action goes on autopilot. It requires zero willpower. It just becomes an intrinsic part of the morning sequence.
And as you're building these systems, the documents outline a very specific, fiercely protective parameter. It is referred to as the 2-day rule.
Ah, yes. A brilliant implementation of behavioral engineering designed to protect the fragile architecture of a new habit.
The 2-day rule is incredibly pragmatic because it acknowledges human frailty. Suppose you are attempting to build the habit of daily exercise. The rule states that you are absolutely permitted to miss one day.
Because life is chaotic.
Exactly. You might get a terrible migraine, a pipe might burst in your kitchen, your car might break down. Missing a single day is recognized as a statistical anomaly, a blip in the radar. However,
the unbreakable covenant of the rule dictates that you must absolutely never miss 2 consecutive days.
No matter how tired you are, no matter how abbreviated the effort, even if you just do 5 push-ups, you cannot allow a second 0 on the calendar.
The neurological rationale behind the 2-day rule is profound. As we discussed with the jungle metaphor, the brain is ruthlessly efficient. It constantly seeks to optimize its pathways based on the most recent behavioral data.
So missing one day doesn't ruin the pathway.
Missing one day does not significantly degrade the myelination of your new habit. However, missing 2 consecutive days signals a new pattern to the brain. Neurologically speaking, missing 2 days is not merely a pause in your progress. It is the active genesis of a brand new competing neural pathway, the pathway of avoidance.
Wow.
The momentum instantly shifts. By strictly enforcing the rule to never miss twice, you prevent the avoidance pathway from ever gaining traction. You protect the structural integrity of the discipline.
I look at this through the lens of identity, which makes the mechanism even more powerful. When I rely on motivation to go to the gym, my internal narrative is, I am a lazy person attempting to execute a difficult exercise task.
There is massive internal friction because my action contradicts my core identity.
Right. But when you implement these automated systems and you fiercely protect them with the 2-day rule, an incredible psychological transformation occurs around the 4th or 5th week. You cross a threshold, you stop trying to do the task, and you start becoming the result.
The repetition provides undeniable evidence to your subconscious.
Yes. You are no longer someone trying to read. The evidence proves you are a reader. You are no longer someone trying to run. You are a runner. The external chore dissolves into an internal, biological truth.
Which represents the ultimate triumph of systemic discipline. The moment your self-image perfectly aligns with your desired actions, the internal friction drops to zero. You no longer expend energy fighting your own nature.
But, and this is a catastrophic caveat, we must address the apex predator of the modern environment. We can meticulously design our rituals, we can protect our habits, but we are conducting these efforts in a combat zone.
And the enemy is the smartphone.
The relentless barrage of notifications and the incredibly toxic, culturally celebrated illusion of multitasking.
The source texts are unequivocal on this subject. Multitasking, when applied to any cognitive endeavor requiring critical thought, is a sheer biological impossibility for the human brain.
I have to challenge the practicality of that statement, though. I hear people say multitasking is bad, but the reality is, I do it constantly. I will be drafting a complex email on my laptop while participating in a virtual conference call on my headset while occasionally glancing at breaking news alerts on my phone. And I feel productive doing it.
The sensation of productivity is an illusion fueled by a low-level adrenaline drip.
Wait, really? An illusion?
You may feel as though you are processing 3 streams of information simultaneously, but functional magnetic resonance imaging fMRI scans reveal a drastically different physical reality. The prefrontal cortex physically lacks the architecture to process 2 complex cognitive tasks in parallel.
So what is my brain actually doing?
What your brain is actually doing is a process called rapid task switching. It is frantically and violently bouncing its spotlight of attention back and forth between the email, the audio from the call, and the text on the phone. And here is the hidden cost. Every single time the brain severs its connection with one target and engages another, it incurs a severe cognitive switching penalty.
Let's break down exactly what that penalty looks like in the brain, because people need to hear this.
Okay, to execute a complex task, the brain must load a massive amount of contextual data into its working memory. It is essentially pulling files from deep storage and holding them active in the prefrontal cortex. This requires significant oxygenated glucose.
Right.
When you are writing that email and you suddenly shift your attention to a text message, the brain drops the context of the email entirely. It clears the workspace to load the context of the text message. When you look back at the email 2 seconds later, the brain must expend another massive burst of energy to fetch and reload the original context.
This continuous loading and unloading rapidly depletes the brain's energy reserves.
Exactly. You are functionally leaking massive amounts of cognitive horsepower.
So we aren't parallel processing, we are just constantly stalling and restarting the engine.
Exactly. And the documents provide a truly startling temporal metric to quantify this damage. Studies referenced in the text demonstrate that when you are engaged in deep, complex thought and your attention is fractured, say your phone buzzes, and you glance at an incoming notification for a mere 2 seconds, it takes the brain an average of roughly 20 minutes to completely rebuild the complex neural architecture and return to the exact depth of focus you possessed prior to the interruption.
20 minutes of lost cognitive depth for a 2-second distraction. That math is terrifying.
It explains the modern epidemic of exhaustion. If you sit down to work for an hour and you allow yourself to be interrupted by a notification every 15 minutes, you have never once achieved the state of deep focus.
You've just spent the entire hour trapped in a shallow, fragmented state of constant neurological recovery.
You have expended. The defense mechanism proposed in the documents is the rigorous implementation of structured deep work. This involves intentionally carving out specific temporal blocks where you are utterly and uncompromisingly inaccessible to the outside world.
Like the Pomodoro technique.
Yes, the text suggests utilizing something like the Pomodoro technique as a baseline. For example, 25 minutes of pure, uninterrupted, single-task focus, followed by 5 minutes of deliberate rest. During those 25 minutes, all digital notifications must be disabled at the operating system level, the phone must be physically removed from the visual environment,
Out of sight entirely.
and the brain is permitted to engage with one and only one complex problem.
The analogy I use to conceptualize this is the difference between a standard light bulb and a laser. Consider a standard 60-watt incandescent bulb illuminating your living room. It takes a certain amount of electrical energy and scatters it omnidirectionally. It lights up the walls, the floor, the ceiling. The light is soft, diffuse, and ultimately powerless. It cannot penetrate anything. That 60-watt bulb is the precise model of the distracted modern mind, spreading its finite cognitive energy across 10 open browser tabs, 3 group chats, and a television playing in the background. But if you take that exact same quantity of energy, those same 60 watts, and instead of scattering it, you align the photons, forcing them to travel in a coherent unidirectional wave. You create a laser.
And a 60-watt laser can literally cut through solid quarter-inch steel.
Exactly. When you eliminate the task switching, banish the phone, and lock into a single task for 25 minutes, you stop being a dim bulb. You become a laser beam, capable of cutting through the most complex problems in your industry.
The laser analogy perfectly captures the required coherence of thought. However, to maintain that coherence, the texts highlight a profoundly uncomfortable social reality. True focus demands the ruthless courage to say no.
Which goes against all our evolutionary programming. We are deeply social primates. Our survival historically depended on our responsiveness to the tribe. Saying no feels like we're inviting ostracization.
It triggers deep-seated social anxiety, yes. But protecting your deep work requires an ironclad boundary. You must decline non-essential meetings. You must suppress the dopamine-driven urge to reply to every communication instantaneously. And you must become comfortable with letting minor fires burn while you focus on the macro objective.
It's a mindset shift.
In a modern economy where the vast majority of the workforce is chronically distracted, fragmented, and neurologically exhausted, protecting your attention is not merely a clever productivity hack. It is the ultimate, unassailable competitive advantage.
The individual who retains the capacity to sit in a quiet room and think deeply about a singular complex problem for 2 continuous hours will inevitably dictate the future of their field.
Unquestionably.
Now, we have established a highly robust baseline. We understand the necessity of continuous learning to outpace the half-life of knowledge. We understand how to utilize the basal ganglia to build systemic discipline over fleeting motivation. And we understand the requirement of laser-like deep work.
The practical foundation.
Right. But here is where we must thread these concepts into something far more profound. Because when we transition to the second batch of documents, the purple-inked notes from the visionary inventor, we realize that these grounded productivity habits are merely the warm-up act.
This is where it gets truly paradigm shifting.
The question these historical texts force us to confront is breathtaking. What if focus, discipline, and deep work are not simply cognitive tools to help you clear your inbox or secure a corporate promotion? What if they are the literal physical mechanisms we use to tune our biological hardware to the hidden physics of the universe?
We are now entering the philosophical and physical territory of the anonymous inventor, and doing so requires us to completely dismantle our conventional Newtonian understanding of reality.
Let's clearly define the context for the listener. We are analyzing the synthesized worldview of an undisputed historical genius, a man whose practical inventions literally electrified the globe, a mind that perceived the architecture of the future decades before his contemporaries.
Yet he passed away alone in a modest hotel room.
Yeah. Following his death, his belongings were cataloged, and among his technical schematics was a leather-bound journal, meticulously written in purple ink. This journal contained his grand, unified theory of existence, and his core foundational premise contradicts everything we perceive with our naked eyes.
He argued that the universe is not a collection of solid, unchangeable, dead objects interacting in empty space. It is a massive, vibrating, interconnected symphony of frequencies.
It requires a monumental conceptual leap.
The inventor's thesis, which aligns remarkably with modern quantum field theory, actually, is that matter, at its most fundamental level, does not exist as solid substance. Everything from the supermassive stars burning in the cosmos, to the cellular structure of a human heart, to the visible light illuminating your desk, and crucially, the invisible thoughts generating within your neural network, is simply energy vibrating at specific, measurable frequencies.
So what we perceive as solid matter is merely energy condensed to a slow enough vibration to be perceptible to our biological senses.
Exactly.
If we accept the premise that absolutely everything is a frequency, what are the implications for the human brain?
According to the hypotheses detailed in the Purple Journal, the human brain is not merely a biological calculator, it is the most sophisticated, high-fidelity electromagnetic transmitter and receiver in the known universe.
Our thoughts and emotions are not isolated biological impulses trapped within the confines of our skulls.
No. The electrical firing of our synapses generates literal electromagnetic wave fields that are continuously broadcasted outward, rippling into the physical environment.
So we are functionally acting as bipedal radio broadcasting towers, transmitting 24 hours a day.
That is the precise analogy used. Furthermore, the texts propose specific vibrational metrics for different states of human consciousness. They argue that emotions carry distinct, quantifiable frequencies.
Like what?
A state of intense fear, chronic stress, or deep anxiety produces a chaotic, jagged wave pattern vibrating at a very low frequency, roughly estimated around 100 hertz.
And on the flip side,
Conversely, states of deep compassion, profound gratitude, and true creative flow produce highly structured, coherent wave patterns, vibrating at significantly higher harmonious frequencies, notably centered around 528 hertz.
528 hertz.
And this specific higher frequency is mathematically structured in such perfect resonance that the texts claim it facilitates cellular repair and physical healing.
I need to pause and challenge the mechanics of this, because I want to ensure we aren't veering into vague mysticism here. We need to ground this in the physics outlined in the journal. Are the texts genuinely proposing that when I utilize the discipline we discussed earlier, when I sit at my desk, enter a state of deep work, and intensely focus my mind on a clear, positive objective, I am not just having an isolated psychological experience? Am I physically generating electromagnetic signal that interacts with and alters the material reality around me?
They are proposing exactly that. And the specific principle of physics that governs this interaction is called resonance.
The tuning fork experiment.
Yes.
Let's explore exactly how that works, because it provides the mechanical bridge between thought and reality. If you walk into a laboratory and set up two identical acoustic tuning forks, pitched to the exact same note, say an A note at 440 hertz, and you place them on opposite sides of the room,
Right.
if you strike the first tuning fork with a rubber mallet, it begins to vibrate and produce sound. The second tuning fork is completely untouched. But within seconds, the invisible sound waves traveling through the air will strike the second tuning fork. Because it is structurally designed to hold the exact same frequency, it will spontaneously begin to vibrate and sing on its own.
They share a frequency, therefore they invisibly transfer energy. They resonate.
The Purple Journal takes the acoustic mechanics of the tuning fork and scales it up to quantum mechanics and human consciousness.
The inventor theorized that when you train your mind to hold a specific, coherent frequency, whether that frequency represents an innovative engineering solution, a state of abundance, or profound peace, your electromagnetic field begins to resonate with corresponding energy fields in your environment.
When two systems vibrate at the same frequency, they do not just connect. They synchronize and exponentially amplify each other through a process called constructive interference.
This provides a literal mechanical explanation for the phenomenon of vibes. Everyone has experienced this. You walk into a crowded room, and without a single word being spoken, you instantly connect with a specific stranger.
Or, conversely, you enter a situation and get an overwhelming bad vibe that makes the hair on your arm stand up, and you immediately know you need to leave.
We tend to dismiss this as instinct or magic, but based on this text, it is quantum resonance. Your electromagnetic fields are interacting and transferring data long before your conscious brains process a single word of dialogue.
It is the underlying physics of human intuition. And to truly understand how the inventor learned to harness and manipulate these frequencies, we must examine the deep mathematical obsession detailed throughout his journal. He recognized that if the universe is a symphony, mathematics is the sheet music. He was specifically fixated on a highly particular numerical code.
The ratio of 3, 6, and 9.
Yes. This segment of the documents is where his eccentricities suddenly make terrifying sense. Historical accounts noted that he would compulsively walk around a city block exactly 3 times before entering a building. He demanded that hotel staff provide him with room numbers that were mathematically divisible by 3.
To the outside observer, it appeared to be severe obsessive-compulsive disorder.
But when you read his journal's explanation, it reveals a profound structural logic.
He was not a victim of superstition. He was actively practicing cosmic mathematics. To understand his logic, we must look at the geometric sequence of biological life and material reality. The physical world grows through a sequence of doubling. 1 cell becomes 2, 2 become 4, 4 become 8, 8 becomes 16, 16 become 32, and so on.
Okay, yeah, follow.
If you apply digital root mathematics to this doubling sequence, meaning you add the double-digit numbers together to get a single digit, a fascinating pattern emerges. 16 becomes 1 plus 6, which is 7. 32 becomes 3 plus 2, which is 5. 64 becomes 6 plus 4, which is 10, which reduces to 1.
The pattern loops infinitely. 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5.
This sequence represents the physical material world. But notice which numbers are entirely absent from that sequence.
The 3, the 6, and the 9 are completely missing from the physical blueprint.
Exactly. The inventor believed that 3, 6, and 9 existed outside the physical doubling sequence because they represented the higher dimensional energetic flux field that actually dictates the behavior of the physical numbers. They are the invisible forces shaping the clay.
Let's explore the specific energetic properties he assigned to each of those three digits based on his study of ancient texts.
According to his synthesis, the number 3 represents the vector of creation, the initial spark, the raw force of bringing energy out of the void and into existence. The number 6 represents universal harmony, the stabilization of that energetic spark, the balancing of opposing forces. Finally, the number 9 is the apex. It represents absolute completion, the spiritual gateway where energy returns to the source. It encompasses all other numbers.
The inventor noted that ancient architects possessed a deep understanding of this energetic geometry, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely. The Great Pyramid of Giza, the grand classical temples of antiquity, the towering Gothic cathedrals of Europe. These structures were not merely designed for aesthetic grandeur. They were meticulously engineered, utilizing these exact 369 mathematical proportions to serve as massive structural resonant antennas. They were designed to gather, focus, and amplify these specific cosmic frequencies.
The idea of a pyramid acting as a cosmic antenna is incredible, but what makes these documents so valuable is that they don't just leave us with ancient history, they provide an immediate biological application of its mathematics. You don't need to build a cathedral, you have a physiological antenna right now.
Right, the breathing technique.
Exactly. The texts detail a specific breathing technique engineered around this ratio. It requires you to inhale deeply through the nose for precisely 3 seconds, engaging the creation of energy in the body. You then hold that breath in the lungs for 6 seconds, enforcing harmony and stabilization within the bloodstream. Finally, you exhale slowly and completely for 9 seconds, representing completion and the release of energy.
We really must analyze the biological mechanism of why this works. When you execute this specific 369 breathing pattern, you are directly manipulating your vagus nerve, which acts as the control center for your parasympathetic nervous system.
But beyond mere relaxation, you are mathematically tuning your heart rate variability.
By forcing your respiratory system into this sacred geometric rhythm, you are literally syncing your biological metronome to the fundamental mathematical rhythm of the universe. You are optimizing your body's electromagnetic output.
Which naturally leads us to ask, what exactly is the baseline frequency we are trying to sync our internal antenna with? The documents reference a massive planetary phenomenon known as the Earth's heartbeat.
This represents one of the most mechanically profound realities detailed in the collection. Our planet is not merely an inert sphere of rock and water suspended in a vacuum. It functions as a gigantic electromagnetic generator.
Between the surface of the Earth and the inner edge of the ionosphere, which sits roughly 60 miles above us, exists a closed waveguide cavity.
Right. And every second, thousands of lightning strikes occur globally, constantly pumping electromagnetic energy into this cavity. These lightning strikes create standing electromagnetic waves that continuously circle the globe.
The fundamental baseline frequency of these standing waves, the literal, measurable planetary heartbeat clocks in at precisely 7.83 hertz.
A phenomenon scientifically recognized as the Schumann Resonance?
7.83 hertz. That specific number is incredibly critical when we look at the neurology of the human brain, isn't it?
The correlation is undeniable. Evolutionarily, humanity developed entirely within the envelope of this specific frequency. Neurological measurements demonstrate that when human beings step away from the chaotic, high-frequency electromagnetic noise of modern technology, when we walk barefoot on the soil, or when we engage in deep, prolonged meditation, our brain waves actively shift.
They slow down from the frantic, high-alert beta state, crossing into the deeply relaxed and creative alpha and theta states.
And the exact frequency the human brain settles into during optimal creative flow perfectly mirrors that planetary heartbeat of 7.83 hertz.
Let me play devil's advocate here, because this creates an interesting paradox. I understand the biological necessity of the 7.83 hertz frequency, but if our brains are hardwired to thrive at that specific resonance, how do we explain human progress?
How do you mean?
We have achieved our most incredible technological, medical, and engineering advancements precisely during the modern era, an era where we are utterly surrounded by chaotic, high-frequency digital noise and concrete infrastructure. Doesn't that contradict the premise that we must be barefoot in the woods to access our highest intellectual capacity?
It's a valid challenge, but it actually reinforces the text's premise. If you examine the biographies of history's greatest innovators, their most profound eureka moments rarely occurred while they were actively grinding in a noisy laboratory or surrounded by distractions.
The massive conceptual breakthroughs almost universally happen when the individual removes themselves from the high-frequency chaos.
It is the classic shower thought phenomenon. An engineer struggles with a problem for months in the lab, gets nowhere, then takes a quiet walk through the woods on a Sunday, shifts their brain into the alpha state matching the 7.83 hertz resonance, and the perfect solution instantly materializes in their mind.
So the modern world provides the tools for execution, but the blueprint of the breakthrough is always accessed at the planet's baseline frequency.
Exactly.
To truly drive home the sheer physical power of dialing into the correct frequency, I want to return to our opening hook. We need to fully unpack the story of the shoebox oscillator, because it is the ultimate mechanical demonstration of compounded resonance.
Right. The inventor builds this tiny pneumatic device.
It requires almost no power to run. It just produces a very precise mechanical tapping. He walks into his laboratory, clamps into the main structural iron beam, and turns it on.
And to the uneducated observer, it is a completely harmless experiment.
Exactly. At first, it is just a quiet tap, tap, tap. But the inventor had previously calculated the exact natural resonant frequency of the building itself. Every physical object has a frequency at which it naturally vibrates. He tuned his tiny oscillator to perfectly match the building's frequency.
Because the frequencies were perfectly matched, the energy from the tapping did not dissipate. It transferred into the steel and compounded.
The first tap moved the beam a microscopic fraction of a millimeter. The second tap hit right as the beam was swinging back, doubling the momentum. Within minutes, the compounding energy transformed a quiet tap into a massive kinetic force. The floors began to ripple. The windows violently rattled in their frames.
The sheer acoustic power of perfectly tuned resonance was literally tearing the molecular bonds of the concrete apart, forcing the inventor to smash his own machine to prevent a localized catastrophe.
And when we extract the physics lesson and apply it to our own personal development, the parallel is astounding. That tiny, focused daily habit reading those 10 pages, maintaining that 25-minute deep work block, is your shoebox oscillator.
It seems incredibly small, almost powerless on day one.
But if that habit is perfectly aligned with your ultimate goal, and you apply it consistently without missing 2 days, the compounding resonance of that tiny action contains enough force to completely shatter the obstacles holding you back.
The mechanics are identical, which brings us to the ultimate operational question. How does an individual consciously combine their daily systemic habits with these profound cosmic frequencies?
The methodology provided in the documents is the practice of intense mental construction, commonly referred to as visualization.
But we must differentiate this from the modern pop psychology version of visualization. This is not about sitting cross-legged, closing your eyes, and daydreaming vaguely about having a sports car or a bigger house. The inventor elevated visualization to a terrifying level of engineering precision.
His methodology was unparalleled. The historical texts reveal that during the initial stages of his most revolutionary inventions, he almost never utilized paper blueprints or physical prototypes. He constructed massive, intricately complex electrical dynamos and alternating current motors entirely within the internal architecture of his mind.
He would visualize the exact dimensions of every brass gear, the specific winding of every copper coil, and the precise flow of the electrical current.
And he did not just construct static images. He would mentally turn the machines on. He would literally run these complex generators in his imagination for weeks at a time, allowing them to operate continuously in his subconscious.
Then he would mentally halt the machine, disassemble it in his mind, and inspect the imaginary components for wear and tear.
He would check to see where friction was degrading a specific bearing or where the electrical load was dangerously overheating a wire. He isolated and solved complex, real-world thermodynamic and engineering problems in the invisible realm before he ever touched a physical tool.
The best analogy for this process is found in modern digital media. Consider how a multi-million-dollar blockbuster film or an advanced video game is created. They utilize sophisticated 3D rendering software.
Right.
The digital artist sits at a terminal and constructs a high-fidelity 3D model of an entire city. Inside the architecture of the software, they can apply the laws of gravity, they can test the volumetric lighting, and they can run physics simulations to see exactly what happens when a digital vehicle crashes into a digital concrete wall. They completely perfect the reality inside the simulation before they ever print the final product to the screen.
The Purple Journal is arguing that the human mental realm is a perfectly real physics laboratory. The brain is the original ultimate 3D rendering software. The act of creation always happens there first.
The physical, tactile reality we walk around in every day is simply the delayed, highly dense 3D physical printout of what we have already constructed, run, and perfected within the rendering engine of our minds.
To understand the mechanism of how a mental 3D rendering successfully transitions into physical reality, we must examine the concept of the ether, as extensively theorized in the journal. The inventor fundamentally rejected the orthodox scientific notion that the vacuum of space is completely empty.
Instead, he posited that all of space, from the gaps between galaxies to the space between the atoms in your hand, is completely saturated by an invisible, highly responsive ocean of subtle energy. He referred to this medium as the ether.
Like an invisible conductive fluid that seamlessly connects every particle in the universe.
Precisely. But more importantly, the journal characterizes the ether as the ultimate cosmic information field. It acts as an infinite quantum library.
According to this theory, every possible thought, every potential technological invention, and every perfect solution to every complex problem already exists as a vibrational blueprint suspended within the ether.
When you engage in the intense, precise visualization practiced by the inventor, you are not miraculously inventing something out of thin air. You are tuning the receiver of your mind to the exact frequency required to download the pre-existing blueprint from the ether.
I need to push back heavily on this concept because it immediately invites skepticism. If there is an infinite, freely accessible cosmic library floating all around us in the ether, packed with world-changing inventions and perfect solutions, why isn't everyone accessing it? Why am I not casually downloading a revolutionary zero-point energy source or a cure for cellular aging while I'm standing in line waiting for my coffee?
Because access to the ether is heavily encrypted, and the password to unlock it requires absolute purity of intention combined with intense, distraction-free cognitive focus.
Oh, right.
This is exactly where the two halves of our source documents brilliantly synthesize. Think back to our extensive discussion in the first half. Why did the texts place such a relentless emphasis on the architecture of discipline? Why did we discuss the devastating biological penalty of task switching and smartphone notifications?
Because a distracted, exhausted mind is vibrating erratically.
Yes. It cannot generate the stable, high-frequency, coherent resonance required to interface with the ether. The internal signal is overwhelmed by static. Only a mind that has been rigorously trained by daily discipline, quieted by the practice of deep work, and driven by a clear, pure intention can tune its internal radio dial cleanly enough to decipher the subtle broadcasts of the universe.
That makes profound sense. The endless noise of the modern world, the scrolling, the notifications, the multitasking, is literal static on the radio dial, preventing the download.
Exactly, and understanding the ether provides a perfectly mechanical explanation for a phenomenon that historians and sociologists have always found deeply baffling: the reality of simultaneous invention.
Yes. Throughout human history, there are countless documented instances of individuals located on opposite sides of the globe, possessing absolutely no means of communication with one another, inventing the exact same complex technology at the exact same moment.
It occurred with the development of calculus between Newton and Leibniz. It occurred with the invention of the telephone. It occurred with the formulation of the theory of evolution.
Orthodox history attempts to dismiss these events as mere statistical coincidences. But when analyzed through the lens of the inventor's journal, the mechanism is brilliantly clear. The information for calculus or the telephone was ripening in the ether. The collective frequency of humanity's technological understanding had finally elevated to a point where that specific knowledge became accessible.
Multiple brilliant minds, separated by thousands of miles of ocean, simultaneously stabilized their focus, tuned their internal receivers to the exact same frequency in the ether, and downloaded the exact same energetic blueprint at the exact same time. The knowledge does not belong to the inventor, it belongs to the universe.
The inventor is merely the highly tuned biological antenna capable of catching the signal and manifesting it into physical reality.
Which brings us to the final and unquestionably the most profound secret contained within the Purple Journal. It is a concept that challenges our most fundamental, deeply ingrained perception of daily existence.
We are talking about the true physical nature of time. Every single one of us intuitively experiences time as a rigid, straight line. A strict chronological progression from yesterday into today and inevitably into tomorrow. You cannot travel backward, and you are forced to passively wait for the future to arrive.
But the texts argue that this linear perception is a complete biological illusion. Time is not a geometric line. Time is a frequency.
This represents the pinnacle where quantum physics and deep philosophical inquiry merge into a singular, cohesive truth. The text suggests that because absolutely everything is fundamentally composed of vibrating energy, past events do not merely vanish into an empty void.
They leave permanent, measurable electromagnetic echoes imprinted within the environment of the ether. And crucially, the future is not some empty, predetermined hallway waiting for us to walk down it.
The future exists right now as a vibrating, dynamic quantum field of pure potentiality. It consists of infinite possible outcomes, infinite timelines, all vibrating simultaneously at different frequencies, waiting for an observer to collapse the wave function into physical reality.
So we aren't just passively marching forward into a pre-written future, we are actively electromagnetically selecting it based on our current frequency.
We are continuously calling it forth. By elevating our collective and individual frequencies through the rigorous application of discipline, pure intention, and the harmony of the 369 mathematics humanity, possesses the literal power to actively shape and magnetize a specific future, rather than helplessly waiting to see what random timeline happens to manifest around us.
Let's bring this entire exploration all the way full circle. This is the grand synthesis. This is the ultimate conceptual thread that flawlessly binds the two completely different stacks of documents together.
When we began this journey, we talked about the grueling grind, the feeling of being stuck on the treadmill. We discussed the mundane mechanics of reading 10 pages a day, hacking through the jungle of neuroplasticity, overcoming the paralyzing fear of failure, and locking your smartphone in another room so you can engage in 25 minutes of deep work.
At first glance, those simply sound like standard, pragmatic productivity tips designed to help you clear your inbox or impress a manager.
But as the documents reveal, they are infinitely more powerful than that. They are the literal mechanical levers of cosmic tuning. Discipline, continuous learning, and laser-like focus are the physical methods by which we quiet the chaotic, low-frequency static of the modern world.
When you reframe failure with the word yet, you instantly stop broadcasting the 100 hertz frequency of fear and chaos.
When you focus intensely on a single complex problem without yielding to distraction, you physically transform your scattered 60-watt light bulb into a cutting laser. You are literally elevating the coherence of your electromagnetic field. The daily habits are the dials you turn to tune your biological antenna to the frequency of creation.
When we grasp the profound implications of this synthesis, it completely revolutionizes how we view our place as a species. From birth, we are culturally conditioned to perceive ourselves as passive victims, victims of economic circumstance, victims of biological determinism, or victims of random luck.
But the unified, undeniable message embedded within these documents is that we are conscious, highly empowered architects. The tree machines that are required to change the future of the world are not constructed from steel beams, copper wiring, or silicon microchips. The ultimate, most powerful technology in the universe is an awakened, disciplined, fully focused human mind.
We are the machines. Our minds are the engines that generate reality.
Which brings us right back to the exact scenario where we started. Remember that agonizing feeling of being stuck on the treadmill, the profound exhaustion, the stagnation, the bitterness of watching everyone else accelerate while you remain paralyzed.
The revelation here is that you are only trapped on that treadmill because your internal dial is currently tuned to the frequency of the treadmill.
You are constantly broadcasting a signal of stagnation, distraction, and frustration into the ether. And the physics of the universe, operating as a perfect resonant mirror, is simply echoing that exact stagnation right back into your physical reality.
It is the inescapable law of resonance in action. You will perpetually receive the physical manifestation of the exact frequency you are currently transmitting.
So, as we conclude this session, I want to leave you with a final, highly provocative thought to mull over as you step back into your daily routine. Based on the mechanical neurobiology and the quantum physics we've explored today, you must recognize that you are constantly broadcasting a measurable signal to the universe every single second of every single day. There is no off switch to your biological antenna.
Based on the daily habits you have built, your level of systemic discipline, the specific way you neurologically react to failure, and the internal dialogue you allow to loop endlessly in your head, what frequency are you broadcasting right now?
And, more importantly, if the universe is indeed a perfect, highly responsive mirror, what exactly is it getting ready to broadcast back to you?
That is the ultimate defining question of human existence, and the power to adjust the dial rests entirely in your hands.
Keep that relentless curiosity alive, my friends. Protect your attention as if it were your most valuable asset, Consciously tune into the frequencies that serve your highest potential, and whatever you do, never stop learning. We'll catch you on the next exploration.